So this is really fascinating. I remember coming across this a few years ago. It's a prophecy in the Talmud, the rabbinic writings, commentary on the Torah, on Torah law, philosophy, written thousands of years ago by the ancient sages, Jewish sages. And they are talking about, in this section, in this chapter of the Talmud, about what they predict, and they were speaking, of course, with a huge amount of divine inspiration, what they predict and prophesize would happen in the era just before the Messianic era, in what's commonly referred to as the end of days. And I remember just thinking about it just over the past few days, because I was thinking, gosh, so many things that it says would happen. I'm starting to think, didn't I just read that in the news? I wanted to share it with you because, look, I think this is fascinating stuff, quite remarkable, and it should definitely give us a lot of pause for thought. So it's actually a fairly lengthy prediction. I actually was thinking of putting the text up at the bottom, but it's quite long. So I thought I'll just read it out to you and then offer some insight into what it means when it's talking about these things, and then just give you some general thoughts at the end. So let me read it to you. This is in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in the tractate or chapter Sota, page 49b. So it says, the rabbi said, in the times of the approach of the Messiah, chutzpah, that's the word it uses, but it can really mean as like, impudence, rudeness, just being cheeky, mischievous, that's going to increase. Now, what does it mean? It means that respect for elders, the scholars, and authority will decline. People will behave arrogantly, without shame, openly defying moral standards. The people will act with selfishness and lack humility because the world will be at its lowest spiritual point in some respects. And this also refers to a mockery of Torah values, where people will question and degrade sacred traditions. And then it says, high costs will pile up. It says costs are going to spiral. And, this is where I start to think, gosh, isn't that like one of the issues of our time at the moment? Rising costs. So the commentary on this is that despite an abundance of goods, prices will still be high due to greed and corruption or unstable economies. And then it says, although the vine shall bring forth its fruit, wine will nevertheless be expensive. So even when nature is abundant, essential products will still be unaffordable, either due to artificial shortages, corruption, or perhaps divine decree. And then it says the monarchy, which really means the governments that we have, will turn to heresy. Governments will abandon their belief in God. They'll promote secularism, corruption, and hostility to Torah values. And it's not just about kings that it's referring to. It's referring to all forms of leadership, political, religious, educational, failing to uphold morality. There being a crumbling, a sense of a shaking of people's faith in institutions. Like, goodness me, do we see that happening across not just the Jewish world, but beyond as well. People's faith in political leadership, in moral leaders, in religious leaders, through scandals, through a lack of conviction in leadership, through corruption. People feeling like they don't know where to turn to, who to turn to for leadership. And then it says, and there will be no one to give reproof about this. People will stop rebuking wrongdoing because they'll fear backlash or simply give up on trying to correct society, and truth will become unpopular. And those, among the masses who feel like, where do I turn to? There won't be people that they feel they can turn to. And there'll also be this culture of fear for those who do wish to speak the truth. I mean, I think about cancel culture. I think about the fact that there's just this vacuum of leadership. And then it says the meeting place of the sages will become a place of promiscuity. So promiscuity may refer to intellectual dishonesty, where morality and teachings are misused for personal gain. Or there's a loss of spiritual sanctity, where even sacred places are tainted. Then this is where it gets really interesting again. I think about the news. The next thing it says is that the Galilee shall be destroyed, and the Gavlan, which some say is referring to the Golan, or this sort of Syrian area, southern Syrian area, northern Israel, it will be destroyed and it will be desolate. Now, who knows what the future will hold in the coming months and years? But what have we seen happen since October 7th is people living in the northern parts of Israel have had to escape to the south because of the rockets, because of the threats of attack. Now, as again, I don't know what's going to happen in the months ahead, but we've definitely seen some of this happening. And then it says, the men of the border shall go round from city to city to seek charity, but they will find no mercy. It says border towns are going to be the first to suffer in times of war and instability. And the wisdom of scribes will putrefy. Torah scholars are going to lose their influence, and true Torah knowledge will decline. And then it says, and people who fear sin will be held in disgust. Those who are truly righteous will be mocked and seen as foolish. Society will despise religious observance, calling it outdated or extreme. Moral people will be persecuted, secular values will dominate. And then it says, and the truth will be absent. Honesty and integrity will disappear. People will be deceitful in business, relationships, and leadership. Even when the truth exists, it will be ignored or reinterpreted. The world will become full of fake narratives and misinformation. And then it says, the youth will shame the face of elders. Elders will stand before minors, meaning that young people will no longer respect their elders. Instead, elders will be forced to submit to them. And don't we see that happening today, where it's youth and the young influencers are the ones we turn to for just all of our attention, basically, all of our praise, all of our glory, all of our power. Then it says normal family relations will be ruined. A son will disgrace a father. A daughter will rise up against her mother. A daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. There's going to be a lot of rebellion within families, and that will become the norm. Family relations will be tainted by selfishness and lack of gratitude. There's so much family breakdown at the moment. I think more aloneness than we've ever really seen before. Family was just taken as, default. You center your lives around your family. Today, not talking to your parents over something that previous generations might consider fairly arbitrary has become normalized. And then it says, a man's enemies will be the members of his household. Family members will betray and turn against each other. Even within homes, people will feel alone and unsafe. And then it says, the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. Leaders will not lead, but will instead follow public opinion, like a dog that appears to lead but actually follows its master. They will have no shame, just as a dog has no embarrassment. And society will prioritize superficiality over depth. It says, a son will no longer be ashamed before his father. This refers to a breakdown of authority and morality. Children will see their parents as equals rather than as figures to respect. And then it says, and upon what will there be for us to rely? Only upon our Father in heaven. When all societal structures fail, the only hope is emunah, faithfulness in God. And it's a call to spiritual resilience, reminding us that despite the darkness, God is always in control. So, amazing. It's talking about total breakdown in societal leadership and moral leadership. A celebration of the superficial of youth, and disregard of elders. It talks about people being insolent and rude and chutzpah, and mischief being, the word of the day and the characteristic of the day, whereas truth will become something that's almost irrelevant, and people that seek truth will be dismissed and discarded. And then it also talks about these economic challenges where prices will skyrocket despite there seemingly being plenty. It talks about the fact that there's going to be war and battle in Israel. And it just really speaks about there being this vacuum where there's just a real sense of things breaking down and aloneness and a lot of selfishness. So it's definitely food for thought, but I actually wanted to give a positive spin on all of this. Now, you may be surprised to hear that. What positive spin could there be? What I want to argue is that all these things that happen are not just to say, look how bad we are and that, or we need all of this, we're so bad that we need saving from all of this. No, actually, there's something else that I think is going on that is a necessary precursor to the messianic era of where this world becomes perfected. The notion that we're just descending through the generations and going further and further downwards away from the light, there's truth to that. But on the other hand, that just means that we in some ways have harder battles. If we're going further and further from the light, that just means our battles are even harder. You can't blame us. We were born into this generation, so we just have different battles to the past. Now, there's an idea that before Moshiach comes, before we have this perfected world, it's said that God will let the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, run riot, let him loose. He would almost like he was always on a leash, the evil inclination in this world, and now he's like, go full at it. You can do whatever you want. And in some ways, when you look at the world today, yes, we've come a long way, but also there's a lot of problems that we're grappling with. When we talk about the breakdown of morality, of moral leadership, when we look at, just a real lack of moral clarity and people seeking, I think, a lot of superficiality over the things that really matter most in life, as it's talking about family, community, etc., etc. And the reason God does that is not just to test us or anything like that, but it's actually in order for us to fully mature as human beings. Because the reason why he needs to let it loose, the Yetzer Hara, is because he wants us to fully overcome it and fully subdue the evil inclination, so that humanity can have earned its perfected world, not just be handed it on a plate. And the way that we overcome it, I think, is by experiencing everything the evil inclination has to offer, and realizing that what it has to offer is empty. It's nothing. So what happens in this generation is, yes, we have family breakdown. Yes, we have moral, spiritual breakdown. Yes, there's promiscuity. Yes, there's all kinds of terrible treatment of people who are vulnerable, of the Jewish people. But what it's doing to us is getting us and the world to realize the emptiness of these false gods, of these false idols. To realize that actually, as it says at the end of the Talmud, that our only help, the only real wisdom for a life worth living and for what we're really here for and here to do, is by turning upwards, turning towards God. So actually, it will create, by totally letting the Yetzer Hara loose, the evil inclination loose, it will naturally lead humanity to recognize the truth. That the only thing really worthwhile is service of God. Service to God. It's interesting as well that it begins by saying that the first thing that will happen in the time approaching the Messiah is it says there'll be an increase in chutzpah, cheekiness, mischief, particularly among young people. Now, people might look at this and they think, well, that's a terrible thing, that's a bad thing. Actually, I think it's a very good thing, because what's happening is young people, in particular, are asking questions. They're asking questions about life. They're challenging every single presupposition they may have about the world. And people think, oh, it's so terrible. Actually, is it? Maybe that's what will pave the way towards a totally transformed godly world, where people ask the biggest questions, the biggest question of all being, why am I here? kids turn to their parents today and they say, the parent says, do this. And the kid says, why should I? I didn't ask to do it. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be born. And they're not saying it to be difficult. It's just a statement of fact. I know they don't need to go and see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. They just are waking up to this reality. And it's chutzpahdik. Yes, it's mischievous to say that, but it's also going to create certain logical steps towards an unavoidable conclusion, which is that if I didn't ask to be here, then why am I here? And eventually we're going to come to the realization that we're here not because we're the ones that need to be here, but because God needs us to be here. And in this last generation, we're going to try and feel what it's like to totally serve ourselves and be totally selfish and realize it sucks. It's empty. It's purposeless. Because if I didn't even need to be in the first place, then it's ridiculous to be spending a life serving myself and my needs. The chutzpah, the mischief, the selfishness will lead us naturally to come to the conclusion that ultimately the only thing that's worth doing is serving the purpose for which you exist, which is to serve God's plan and to be his servant, his partner. And that is what we will discover will provide us with ultimate meaning, satisfaction, and purpose.
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.